Coming up on the program, West African Development Bank issues first African sustainability bond. World Bank and Madagascar sign agreement to reduce poverty, deforestation and carbon emissions. And Tanzania's inflation rises to 3.5% in January. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the program. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu. We'll begin the show with intraday market numbers and starting off here on the African continent. And here, only the Nigerian index was positive, rising marginally by 0.01% at intraday. Now, South Africa's JSE index fell marginally by 0.02%, while the EGX 30 shaved off 0.77%. Kenya closed negative on Monday. It was a different picture in the Middle East, where major markets were in the green at intraday. In the UAE, Dubai's main index advanced 0.15%, while Abu Dhabi's index rose 0.12%. Elsewhere in the region, Saudi Arabia's index advanced the most by 1%. The market in Qatar is closed for the Qatar National Sports holidays. All right, let's look at the UK now. The FTSE 100 reversed losses clocked at the start of trading and went higher by nearly 0.2%. Let's get the intraday numbers now from Juliana. Hello, Juliana. Good afternoon. Well, Ocado is the worst performing stock on the FTSE 100, falling 3.3% despite reporting booming sales. Why that sentiment towards Ocado's share?
Yeah, it's an interesting time for Ocado. Clearly, they have the monopoly on online shopping. Online shopping has been the go-to, the saviour over the past 12 months here in Britain. But I think why investors have been put off is because they've set aside £700 million for so many other things. One is investments. They're trying to grow their international portfolio. Of course, there's so much COVID-19 budgets that a lot of the big four grocers, as well as a lot of other retailers here in the UK, have had to put aside. And Ocado are doing that. And at the moment, investors are not sure that they're reaping the rewards. But this does appear to be more of a short-term decision, because as we know, the sale and the move to online shopping is likely to be what everybody is doing in the medium to long term. I believe 32% of people in the UK are now shopping online, and that is likely to increase. But even though they have those record-breaking profits, as you said, still down at intraday by about 1.5%.
Yeah. And the world's biggest travel operator, TUI, says it had received 2.8 million bookings for summer breaks, just over half of 2019 levels, and it's offering 80% of holidays compared with 2019. It looks like the silver lining lies with the vaccines.
Potentially, yes. Although, you know, we heard from the Deputy Chief Medical Officer of England, Professor Van Tam, yesterday saying, you know, if you think you're getting away in the summer, cancel your plans. It's just not that time. But, you know, there is still optimism. TUI, the world's largest tour operator, have said that they've got 2.8 million bookings for the European summer. They didn't disclose exactly how many of those bookings are coming from here in the UK. I can assure you, Chimmy, I'm not one of them. I'm not that brave, but a lot of people are. There is so much pent-up demand, and TUI are not the first tour operator to talk about this. We heard this from Ryanair. We've heard this from EasyJet. People are sick to the teeth of being stuck at home, and they want to get away. But is it likely to happen? That's the billion-dollar question. It is unlikely. We are going to be hearing from Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, in a couple of minutes. He'll be speaking to lawmakers in the House of Commons. And, you know, Britain are going to be making it extremely hard for people to come into this country. And we have been hearing talks about this vaccine passport, particularly in the Schengen area. New details released as well from Israel showing that their highly successful vaccination rollout is decreasing deaths. So there are a lot of countries in Europe that won't want people to come unless they've had this vaccination. So perhaps, this is wishful thinking. Those 2.8 million people who've decided to book their holiday, but I'm certainly not booking mine just yet, Jimmy.
I know, staycation. That's what you do. All right. Elon Musk's investment into Bitcoin seems to be pumping that asset. Are people in London also showing any enthusiasm about that market?
Well, yes and no. I suppose we've got a bit of room to be more enthusiastic than you guys back home. But look, we were speaking about it a couple of weeks ago, weren't we? Bitcoin was $35,000. You asked if I could invest. I said I couldn't afford it. Now it's nearing the 50,000 mark. And that's because Elon Musk has decided to invest $1.5 billion in the digital currency. Not really affecting much on the FTSE at Intraday. We've had some figures of our own. We've had retail sales figures. They're showing that retail sales fell by 1.3% in January. No surprises there. The stores aren't open, and there wasn't many great sales, so people just weren't really shopping during the month of January. We also had some data from Barclaycard showing that consumer spending is dropping. Consumer expenditure is dropping. It was 2.3% in December. It's getting worse in the month of January, so people are just not spending at the moment. So many people are concerned about when we're going to come out of lockdown, whether or not their jobs are safe, and that's all affecting the data. And the FTSE, so at Intraday, the FTSE All Share is up 0.01%. The FTSE 100 is down 0.09%. And the FTSE 250 is up by 0.29%. In the currencies market, the British pound also up against the US dollar by 0.20%, down in the euro by 0.27%, and down on the Japanese yen by 0.37%, Jimmy.
Thanks, Jidana, for updating us on those. And in Europe, stocks were muted this morning, backing a positive trend seen in Asia and the US at the start of the trading week. And let's talk to Chelsea for more. Good afternoon, Chelsea. Well, everybody seemed to be talking about Bitcoin, which has surged to a new record after electric vehicle maker Tesla announced it has invested $1.5 billion in the digital currency. Given Bitcoin's volatility, is this risky for Tesla?
It's definitely risky, and it's a very unusual move for a company to be investing in such a speculative asset. For Bitcoin, for Tesla, they're hoping to potentially make some money off of this investment. But Bitcoin is still extremely volatile. It has been on this big run up. It's been rising for several months, but we've seen it have really bad days as well. Just last month, the cryptocurrency had fallen more than 25% in the course of a day. So for a company to be investing such a large amount of money into an asset that could quickly lose a significant portion of its value is very unusual. Excuse me. Investors don't seem to be very concerned about this right now, and that could be in part because Tesla investors seem to have a lot of overlap with Bitcoin investors. So potentially they see this actually as a good move for Tesla, but it is definitely a risk. And I would say that while some companies may follow in Tesla's footsteps, the more traditional, the more conservative companies will likely steer clear of this until Bitcoin has gotten potentially a little bit less volatile.
And German exports fell almost 10% in 2020 due to the pandemic. Was this dramatic of a drop expected?
We were definitely bracing for a pretty big decline in exports, but I would say it's an eye-popping number. It's the biggest decline since 2009, and actually the second biggest drop we've seen here in Germany since the end of World War II. So it's historic by really any way you measure it. And it also comes even as Germany has a lot really working in its favor right now in terms of exports. In December, for example, we saw German exports to China surging more than 10%. Exports to the U.S. are also very strong right now. So we are seeing some bright spots for German exports, but it wasn't enough to really get Germany out of that hole it fell into at the start of the coronavirus outbreak in March and April of last year. And of course, we don't really know what the recovery is going to look like in 2021 now that many countries remain in lockdown or with severe restrictions for the time being.
And European lawmakers are considering options to force tech giants like Google and Facebook to pay publishers, mirroring an effort underway in Australia. What will this mean for Silicon Valley?
Well, if Europe goes through with this, it will be a big threat to these companies. The EU has for years been trying to get Facebook, get Google to pay news publishers for the content that those platforms are using on their site. And these companies, these tech companies do benefit. They get more viewers. They can sell more advertising based on the viewers that they get from using news content. And news publishers say that they haven't really benefited, that they're not getting paid for it. So there has been this big effort globally to get these companies to pay news publishers for that content. The EU is now looking at ways that it can do that, potentially following the Australian method where they would force Google and Facebook to enter into negotiations with publishers. For Google, they've already said in Australia that if they go through with that, they would actually pull out of the market entirely because it would be too expensive, it would be too risky. The EU is a much bigger whale for Google. It's a much bigger market, and it could potentially be much more risky for them here. But the EU is pretty much undeterred right now. They want to introduce more regulations on big tech. So it's interesting, and I think we'll have to see exactly how that plays out here.
We'll see how that goes. Thank you, Chelsea. Enjoy the rest of the day. And stocks in Asia Pacific mostly advanced today, with Chinese mainland shares leading gains. The benchmark Shanghai Composite rose 2.01%, while the Shenzhen Component advanced 2.36%. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index rose 0.53%. Japan's Nikkei 225 gained 0.4%. South Korea shares slipped as the main Kospi Index declined 0.21%. Australia's S&P ASX 200 also fell 0.86%. And U.S. stock futures were in negative territory this morning, pointing to a less buoyant start to trading on Wall Street after the three major indices posted record highs at Monday's close. Futures contracts tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 11 points. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 hovered near the flat line. The move in futures comes after the three major indices set after round of record highs on Monday. The Dow and S&P 500 have now advanced for 6 straight sessions, while the Nasdaq Composite has finished in the green on 5 of those 6 days. Oil prices edged up earlier today to their highest in 13 months as supply cuts by major producers and optimism over fuel demand recovery support energy markets. Brent crude futures for April gained 0.5% to $60.85 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude for March was at $58.25 a barrel, up 0.5%. But Brent and WTI are at their highest since January 2020. Additional supply reductions by top exporter Saudi Arabia in February and March, on top of cuts by producers in the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and their allies, are tightening supplies and balancing global markets. Investors are also pinning hopes on oil demand recovery when COVID-19 vaccines take effect. And in metals, gold prices inched up in early trade today as a weaker dollar and hopes of a massive U.S. stimulus package to support the virus-stricken economy boosted the precious metals appeal. Spot gold rose 0.1% to $1,832 per ounce, while U.S. gold futures were steady at $1,834 per ounce. The dollar hit a near one-week low in the previous session. Elsewhere, spot silver gained 0.3% to $27.34 an ounce. Platinum rose 0.7% to $1,164, and palladium was steady at $2,330. After the break, we'll look at the developments on the domestic commodities market space. To stay with us. We're talking semovita on our domestic commodities market update today. Semovita is a widely consumed household staple across Nigeria, and in some regions, it is even more popular than the cassava flakes, popularly known as gari or pounded yam. Now, the swallow, which is in high demand, has seen its price flat at 3,600 naira per 10-kilogram bag in the last 2 months, from 3,400 naira in November 2020. Okay, let's talk to Belumi Oshode, one of the research analysts at Financial Derivatives Company, to talk to us more about this particular commodity. Hello, Belumi. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So the price of semovita has remained flat in the last 2 months. What is responsible for this stable price, and what is the outlook for this item in the near term?
So, as we know, towards the festive period, we expect boost in economic activities. We expect that there'll be a lot of buying, there'll be a lot of selling, particularly for food commodities. We expect that people will purchase a lot of food items. So usually there's always an hike or increase in the prices of commodities, and that's what we saw in the price of semovita. Rising to 3,600 naira from 3,400 naira, what we had in November. So we expect that post-festive period that there will be a decrease in prices of commodity, and of course, semovita is not excluded from this. However, the price remained stable after for this post-COVID during this for this festive period, we saw that the price is still the same regardless. So one of the things that could have caused this is probably there was a low demand for semovita, in this season. Probably people do not really purchase it. So suppliers or retailers still have this at their inventory. They still have it in stock, and they still have to sell it first, even if the prices has reduced in the market. And secondly, probably
well, I guess some technical issues there with the internet. Well, we hope to get back to Belumi for more. In the meantime, the West African Development Bank has issued its first sustainable bond worth 750 million euros with a 12-year maturity. The bond, which was oversubscribed 6 times with total demand amounting to 4.4 billion euros, attracted more than 260 investors across the world, including asset managers and institutional investors. The bond carries a coupon of 2.75% and a 300 basis point spread over the average market rate, which represents the lowest rates achieved by the bank in the global financial markets. The issue is part of a sustainability bond framework calling on the bank to finance projects with a high social and environmental impact. Okay, Belumi, it's back. All right, Belumi, let's look at wheat now. Wheat is one of the important ingredients used in the production of semovita. This wheat has seen its price increase by about 33.8% in 2020, while the price of semovita increased by 19.4% in the same year. So what can semovita manufacturers do to hedge against this increase in input price?
So wheat, as we all know, it's a major commodity that is used by producers, as it is used in a lot of production process. We have in pastas, noodles, pastries, for bread and flour, and even for semovita, like you rightly mentioned. So it's an highly demanded commodity. So one thing that producers can do in the short term or in the medium term is to take advantage of opportunities in the commodity market. That's by engaging in forward contracts with suppliers of this commodity. However, in the medium and long term, we need to look inward. Nigeria actually, wheat is the second highest imported food commodity, or let me say commodity in Q2, Q3. And we only produce about 2.06% of our total consumption. We consume about 470,000 tons of wheat in a year, while we produce just about 60,000. See, the margin is very wide. So we need to look inward and see how we can boost our local production so that the price of acquiring wheat, which is a major input, will be lower compared to what it is, and this will affect every other output used for wheat, which of course we use for. So this will affect the prices of all other commodities, and we can see in semovita it can lower down to about probably 3,000 or 3,200, and this will be very significant to the cost of household income, which is already depressed, looking at everything happening in the economy right now.
Now, this commodity is considered a substitute for cassava flakes, otherwise known as gari in local parlance, wheat flour, and other staples. Now, the price of the cassava flakes fell by about 8.03% in February 2021. That's talking about this month. How will the price decline of this substitute affect the demand for semovita?
Okay, so we actually expect an inverse relationship. I have to put it that way. As the price of semovita increases, we expect that rational consumers will rather shift to a more price-friendly commodity like we have in cassava flakes, which is gari. People might want to tilt towards other options just to minimize cost and what have you. So we expect that to affect demand, which I believe has affected demand for semovita right now, because we can see that there's semovita in the market and the price has not reduced like other household staples or other substitutes.
Okay, I guess today the network is not just friendly. All right, we'll move on. Madagascar's Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Environment, Ecology and Forests have signed an agreement with the World Bank's Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, unlocking up to $50 million for efforts to reduce carbon emissions from deforestation and forest degradation between 2020 and 2024. The country's emission reductions program is designed to increase agricultural productivity and reduce rural poverty while improving soil quality, conserving water resources, and protecting vital forests and biodiversity. The program builds on the country's integrated agriculture landscape approach that aims to address the direct and indirect causes of deforestation and degradation and protect important watersheds. Madagascar is the 5th country in Africa and the 11th globally to reach such a milestone agreement with the FCPF. And Tanzania's annual headline inflation has risen to 3.5% in January from the 3.2% recorded in December 2020. Data released by the country's National Bureau of Statistics attributes the increase to the speed of price change for commodities. Food and non-alcoholic beverages inflation rate fell from 3% in December to 2.8% in January. Annual inflation for unprocessed food stood at 1.4% in January, while inflation for all items without unprocessed food stood at 3.7%. That's a wrap on the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago.